Vox Day is with us. He's written the book, The Return of the Great Depression. You know, I'm reading through this, and I got to tell you something. You know, it wouldn't be unprecedented. I mean, when we watched Japan with one stimulus after another, and then a lost decade, and then they lost what? Literally 400 times what their stock market was. They've never recovered. Are you saying this is going to happen, or do we have a chance out of this if, in fact, fiscal discipline returns to Washington?
I'm saying it's going to happen. Certainly fiscal discipline of the sort that Ryan has proposed is helpful, but it's only the first step forward. Once the debt is amassed, there's only two ways for it to go away. One is default, the other one's paying it off.
Mm-hmm. Well, explain.
Well, it's pretty simple. For the past 30 years, nearly all of the GDP growth that we have amassed has been funded by debt. And debt is nothing more than pulling demand forward. It's allowing you to spend money today and consume today what would otherwise be left for tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Since we've been doing it for such an extended period of time, you can take a look at the total amount of debt in the economy, which the Fed reports in its V1 report, and it's at about $52 trillion. And it's been flat at $52 trillion because as much as they've been trying to print more money and create more debt, they haven't been able to do so. The economy just can't support it. And if you look at the Great Depression, we saw a decline from about 270% debt all the way down to around 30. And right now we're pushing through. We're pushing 300% again. And so that means that the amount of debt has to crash, and it means that the economy is going to crash for quite some period of time.
You're basically saying that the United States of America is going to go bankrupt, and you give 10 reasons that this new coming Great Depression 2.0 is going to be wider, deeper, and longer than its predecessor. Explain that.
Yeah, there's no question about it. What a lot of people don't realize is that the Great Depression of the 1930s was largely an American phenomenon. There were obviously some problems in Germany, but that was the result of the Versailles Treaty.
Mm-hmm.
So in France and in England, the Depression was very small in relative terms. In Japan, they actually had enormous growth thanks to the fact that they had taken over Manchuria and China. And so the Depression was largely an American one, and only America tried to fight the Depression through stimulus programs. The whole idea that Herbert Hoover practiced any sort of austerity program is completely false.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happened now is that in addition to other countries being in the same position or worse position than the United States, as bad as our debt situation is, it's worse in Ireland, it's worse in Greece, it's worse in Portugal, it's worse in Japan. But all of those countries, including China, including the UK, the countries of the European Union, all of them have engaged in exactly the same kind of stimulus programs that the Bush and Obama administrations tried. And so what we're going to see, it's failed, of course, as was predicted. And so, but it's not just the Obama and the Bush stimulus programs that are failing. It's the programs in these other countries as well. And so instead of it being a continental scale depression, we're talking about a truly global one that's in the early stages now.
What does it mean? So you think by what year would we officially say this is a... By the way, I'm not as apocalyptic as you. I have a little bit more hope. I think with a growing population, if you really instill fiscal discipline, I think there's a way out of all of this. But certainly the path that we are on is a path to bankruptcy, and it's not sustainable. And I think it could happen. I mean, what are you saying, that America defaults on all of its debt? I mean, does it default, for example, when Russia went under, they defaulted on their foreign debt, but they paid their citizens? Are you saying that U.S. treasuries will become worthless, the dollar will become worthless, that this...
When I'm talking about default, I'm talking about economy-wide debt. The government debt is only about $9 trillion out of the $52 trillion that we're talking about. We're talking about mortgages, corporate, banks, et cetera, and everybody, all the different organizations have a tremendous amount of debt. It's not just the governments, and so a portion of that, a large portion of that, is going to have to default.
How do you define a depression? I mean, we had 25% unemployment. People, my parents talked about it because my parents grew up during the Great Depression. They talked about times being desperate. I mean, you see these long, soup lines, and people literally could not get any work anywhere, any place, no matter how hard they tried.
Well, I think we're seeing a disguised form of depression right now. I think that we're already in it. If you look at cities like Detroit, where the wilderness is actually reclaiming some of the streets and that sort of thing. If you look at the amount of people that are unemployed and underemployed, this would look a lot worse if it wasn't for the fact that the Congress and the Obama administration has had, put the pedal to the metal, and they've nearly doubled the amount of debt that the federal government is currently holding in the past 2.5 years alone. Mm-hmm. And so, the reason it doesn't look so bad is that, to the superficial view, is because as the homeowners have stopped taking out debt and have been defaulting on their houses, and as the financial corporations have been defaulting on their debt, the government has jacked up its debt, nearly 15% per quarter in order to make up for that. That's why if you look at the Z1 report, that $52 trillion is basically flat since early 2008. But they're not going to be able to maintain that indefinitely. And so, the whole idea for the Fed was that, we'll have the government step in and paper over the gap for 18 months to 2 years. And they were able to do that. Frankly, they were able to do it longer than I thought they'd be able to do it. But they're not going to be able to do it indefinitely. And there's no sign whatsoever that private borrowing is picking up at all.
What is it now? I know WorldNet Daily said you had predicted 7 years ago the collapse of the housing and the credit markets. What was your prediction?
Well, I had a number of predictions, some of which were pretty good, others weren't so great. My best one was probably telling people to invest heavily in gold and to avoid the stock market, to avoid the housing market back when gold was at around 300, and it's over 1,400 now. So that was a good call. On the housing market, I said it was going to drop down to 165,000 median on the NAR, the National Association of Realtors report, and that one turned out to only be off by $300. So.
And when did you make that prediction? When did you make that prediction?
Oh, I made that. The gold one was back in 2002. The specific housing price one, I made it at the beginning of 2008 for the end of 2008. I usually do that every year, and usually I can get the housing prices pretty close.
Well, so